Hello everybody and welcome to the channel. In today's video, we have a brilliantly insightful and thoroughly entertaining presentation by astrologer and author Andrea Gerritz titled Astrological Remediation, Handling Difficult Natal Aspects and Transits. And lastly, if you wish to view our current class, workshop and webinar offerings, please visit KeplerCollege.org. And without further ado, let's get into the video. Wonderful. On today's fantastic presenter, Andrea has been a professional astrologer for 24 years. She currently resides in Portland, Oregon, and works exclusively online. While she has written over 15 books on astrology, including several ancient Greek to English translations, she's most well known for her miraculous textbook entitled Astrological Remediation, a guide for the modern practitioner. In this pinnacle text, Gerritz teaches the reader how to resolve any problem in the astrological chart. Nowadays, Andrea can be found at the Moria Press, running a bookstore, event space, and school. Through the daily events at the Moria Press, astrologers from all over the globe read high-level textbooks, have deep conversations about the topic of the week, learn to read their own charts, become better astrologers, and much more. Andrea is also available for astrology readings, tutoring, and one-on-one mentoring. And if you'd like to work with Andrea or join the Moria Press, you can email Andrea gerritz@gmail.com, and you can also check out her website at andreagerritz.com, and she would love to hear from you. And Andrea would love from here to you today, so I'm going to pass on the baton to you to begin.
All right, well, thank you for all that information in the introduction. I have a few comments from that. Number one, I went to Kepler College. I think for us true and meant to be astrologers, when you find astrology, you're just like, oh, there it is. I mean, I was definitely meant for astrology, and though I wanted to get formal education. So I went to Kepler College years ago when it was first starting, and that's when we all met in Seattle. We went, that's when Robert Hand was his professor and Demetra George, and Lee Lehman was one of my professors. I really adore Lee, and so I just want to say I support anyone going to Lee's classes. She's amazing. And then I guess we'll have to decide if I need Toastmasters after this. No, I'm just kidding. I will say that if you do have questions about your natal configuration and remedying those, I absolutely read charts for advanced astrologers all the time who've read remediation and want me and them to take a good look at their chart. I think it's really good to look at your personal chart from a remedy perspective once in your lifetime, at least, just because every natal imprint has its challenges, and we definitely want to master our charts. That's part of the reason to look at a chart. So I guess I'll take it over and screen share. And yeah, we'll go with my PowerPoint here. Now, I have been critiqued a few times in my life, you'd be surprised. And one of the critiques I get is about my PowerPoint because it's so bare bones. But I do that on purpose because the PowerPoint brings a safety to this lecture because it will keep us aware of what point we're speaking to. But I do really want you to focus on what I'm saying more than the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint is a placeholder. So I do the bare bones slides on purpose. So today we are learning astrological remediation theory and methodology. Okay, let's look at that word remediation. Why is it not just astrological remedy? The ending mediation suggests an ongoing process. So it's like, do we remedy a chart once? I would say because we watch cyclical fluctuating elements of the transits, we actually practice remedy over and over and over again. One of the things you might feel overwhelmed about is you might be looking at your natal chart and thinking, I have a Mars conjunct Moon conjunct Saturn, and isn't that a challenging aspect? And do I need a talisman? Do I need a gem? Do I just remedy it once? Do I wear the talisman? How can this fix me for my whole life? And what I would say is actually remediation should be seen as a process of providing remedy every time there's a transit to that natal aspect. So look at it as a lifestyle more than a thing that you do one time. Okay, so first I'll do a little introduction. My name is Andrea Gerritz. I run the Moira Press School. What does the word Moira mean? As you can see, a lot of my lineage is from the ancient Greek astrologers. When I was at Kepler, I studied with I found out about all the ancient Greek texts that needed to be translated, and I had worked as a linguist for years. I'm a sign language interpreter, so I went and learned Greek and Latin and took to translating texts. But in that, I learned the word Moira, and Moira is a fate that we're here to partake in. It's also the word for a degree in the chart. So every planet in your chart is a fate you are here to partake in. even the difficult aspects. If you have a Moon Mars conjunction, Saturn conjunction in Aries, you are supposed to partake in the fate of that aspect of your personality. The first thing we want to kind of assume in astrological remediation is that your chart is perfect under God's green earth, or the gods, or whoever created that chart. There is a natural perfection to you. And so, when you think of the Moira Press, think of the fates you're here to partake in, all of them, challenging and good. Okay, so let's actually introduce the book Astrological Remediation. So as you can see, it's a textbook. People always think they're going to order this book and read it back to front. Now, if you're having a hard time doing that, I just want to tell you that we do reading groups of this book with me in the room with a professor, because it's actually a textbook. In college, we read a book and then the professor is in the room to talk to us about these hard textbooks. Now, I'm not saying this is not readable. If you're an advanced astrologer and you already know how to read transits, you can definitely tackle this book. But also feel free to look at it as a textbook, as something to be studied with other people. Okay. The first question I get asked is, am I a Hellenistic astrologer? And don't worry, you'll learn all nuggets. I just really have to introduce myself here. I want you to know that I have read the Hellenistic Greek text. I've read Vedias Valens in Greek. I've read the Tetrabiblos in Greek. I've read a book called Ensoulment about how the soul gets in the body. I've read the Bible in Greek. Am I a Hellenistic astrologer? As you'll see, I would call myself a teleological astrologer, which is important for what we're doing here today, actually. So if there's one homework you want to do, you're going to get several homeworks. The first thing for you to do is write down Google teleology. Figure out what teleology is. There's an article on astro.com called An Introduction to Teleology for the Modern Astrologer. I wrote that years ago after being queried from the Mountain Astrologer of what did you learn from reading the ancient texts? And what I learned was teleology theory. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is when I read Vedias Valens in Greek, it was the scariest astrological book I've ever read. In fact, a lot of the Hellenistic astrologers are very fate-based, and they look at, like, Mars is bloodshed and shouting and shrieking, and Saturn makes you dry and cold. And now, of course, this applies to today, because these are suggesting that there are negativistic things in a natal chart. One of the things that the Hellenists have done for us is taken a real and brutal look at natal charts. If you have a Mars in Aries, conjunct the Sun, conjunct the Moon, conjunct Pluto, I know this is fake, but that's not possible, but I just like to be extreme. So if you have this in your natal chart, that is actually a malefic aspect of personality. That's what the Hellenistic astrologers knew. So when I was writing these books, the translations, I couldn't alter the translations. We ethically can't alter what we're translating. And though at the end of that, I was like, that's it. There's got to be a remedy for these things. There is no way that this is the end game. And what I found was teleology. Teleology is the study of things becoming themselves. And in fact, ancient teleology was based, or ancient astrology was based on teleology. It was the Tetrabiblos is actually called apotelosmatica, which is all things connected to a telos, which is a thing becoming itself, full on. So what astrology was the study of a thing becoming itself to its nth degree, which we could call mega manifestation. Okay, so today I want you to put your teleologist hat on, and we're saying, what are you becoming? You are not becoming what the person sitting next to you is becoming. You guys are all becoming your own thing. And the study of your chart is the chart of what you are becoming. Okay, so the first question is my chart, is there a problem with it? Is there something wrong with it? Well, from a teleological perspective, you are perfect. You are becoming something. For instance, if you have a Sun-Mars conjunction in Aries in the first house, you might be becoming a professional wrestler. Mars might rule shouting and shrieking and bloodshed, but that is not a bad thing among humans. Gladiators have existed for thousands of years. Okay, so as you'll see later in today's lecture, that one of the things we do is channel energies into the right context so this plant can still grow. Teleologists would continually compare people to plants, and they would say, this plant has a lot of thorns. Have you guys heard that song, Every Rose Has Its Thorn? Well, anyway, some plants are really thorny, and some people are really thorny, and some people are prickly, they might punch you. But that's great in a ring of gladiators. a Sun, Mars, and Aries rising might also create a war general. Okay, so that is a perfect expression under God. Okay, so we want to first say that whatever you are growing is beautiful. Okay, and what we want to just make sure that you can do is not get into trouble as you're growing. We want to make sure that you can dance through every aspect of your chart with a free will kind of bent. It's like we can say like we'll take the fatest fates and make everything else into the greatest greats or something. Like it's like everything we can change, we will today. Okay. All right. Now I know that I can't see you. Normally my teaching style is the Socratic method, and my students are always talking and things. But I want to say, by a raise of hands, which you could just ask yourself here, can you already read a natal chart? Can you already read trends? Oh, I can see people raising their hands. This is so cool. All right, you're actually in the perfect place. Sometimes we think that that is astrology, is learning to read your transits. But actually, today we're going to learn what to do with that information. If you can already read transits, I'm glad because now we can go to the next level of what do we do with that information. Okay, so we already asked where are you from. Now ask yourself, is there anything in your chart or life that you want to remedy? Um, so, I have three. Go ahead and write on a piece of paper, what is it in your chart that you want to remedy? Now, is it going to be the whole thing? No. And in fact, often there's some charts are beautiful that they don't actually need a remedy. Now, I'm not trying to ask you to look for problems in your chart, but most of us have an aspect or two where we're like, that square is a kind of burly. Or like this Sun square Mars, when I get transits to that, I get cranky and I'm sick of that. So whatever it is about your chart, write it down right now. Okay, I'm going to use three examples for today. We're going to do a Saturn conjunct Moon in Capricorn. Someone had emailed us and asked for their natal chart, and so I'll use their aspect. It's a Saturn in Pisces, opposed a Venus, Uranus, Pluto, and Virgo in the 12th house. But that's so that aspect we'll use. And then I thought we'd use this one, Sun, Mars, Mercury conjunction in Aries. Okay, so we have three that we'll use for the lecture today, but I want you to use yours throughout the lecture today. I'm trying to make this as interactive as possible here. Okay, here I just said this. Okay, now the next question to ask yourself is, if you worked as an astral mechanic, what would your job description look like? Okay, now remember, as astrologers, we don't always provide astrological remedies. We only provide astrological remedies when somebody's car is broken or when somebody comes in broken. Okay, so I'm not saying after today that every time you read a chart you should say, "Oh, well, that aspect of your personality needs a remedy," because most often what we do in a chart reading depends on the inquiry. So let's say somebody comes at us and they say, like, I can't stop being violent in my marriage. Well, absolutely, we are going to take on our astromechanic pants and be like, all right, let's see the problem here, Mrs. Okay, let's say it's a lady who's violent. Okay, and so we're like, okay, and then we go in there and we see like a moon square Mars Pluto, and we're like, oh, I can see the problem here in the electrical system. And then we go into this whole process of trying to provide remedies for this problem. Another problem might be I'm really shy and have antisocial personality. Okay, maybe we see that they have a moon Saturn conjunction in Capricorn in the first house, which makes a really inward, scared temperament, right? And we could say, oh, I can see that this is probably the problem in the system. See how I keep saying a system? It's actually a whole system. There are many aspects to the personality. Just because you have one aspect of your personality that's problematic doesn't mean that all parts of your chart are problematic. Advanced astrologers know this. Sometimes we have a square that's also has a trine coming out of it or a grand trine, and astrologers are right about that. They say that the square feeds energy to your trines or something like that. So, the first thing to help yourself be less overwhelmed is know that not every aspect in your chart will need a remedy. But remember that we are becoming astral mechanics. So imagine yourself as an auto mechanic. Okay. So the person comes into an auto mechanic with a car that has a problem. Okay. And then the mechanic pulls out their electrical diagram and they start look like, let's say the right tail light won't come on. And but then it always goes flickers when you pull the handle on the left door. Well, they pull out the electrical diagram, which for us is the astral schematic, the chart, and then they look in the electrical diagram to see what's wrong. That's what we're going to train ourselves to do. Now, if an auto mechanic goes to a party and they ride in someone's car to the party, they don't start creating problems in the car. They don't say, "Oh, well, some of them might do that. Well, you really should get your air conditioning fixed, and like you really should get this glove compartment fixed." I bet we know some astrologers who are like that. I probably was that when I was young, where you look at a chart and you're like, "Oh, well, so anyway, about your violence problem." And it's like, of course, astrologers can see that, right? And sometimes there's this disconnect between what we see and what we should convey, right? So that's information that we might want to convey to our friend who's an astrologer, like, "Oh my God, do you see this Mars, Moon, Pluto? Like that thing could be like, wow, look at that." But we might choose as we get a little wiser to not say that unless the person brings that problem to us. Like we don't want to be the auto mechanic who's like causing problems in the car. Um, Sometimes people go take a car to get it looked at. My daughter just got a car. She's 16 and her dad's a car guy. So he took the car in to have it looked at by his friend who's an auto mechanic to make sure there was no problems before it went on the road. Okay. See how this auto mechanic analogy really helps? Okay, that would be like somebody being like, "Okay, I'm about to get married to Sally. Can you look at her chart and to see if there's any trouble in the system here?" Like I think as long as Sally agrees to that inquiry, we can do that. So we can take a chart and say like, "Okay, I see the gifts in here. Sally's a musician and she's a great singer, and she might punch you. I mean, I don't know. Sally's a feisty one, like." But no, but of course we see everything as handleable, and so we are not going to that's why they're asking. It's because we can fix it. We're a mechanic. I mean, the reason for the mechanic to look over the car is so if there is a problem, like, "Oh, their tire rod end is a little bit weak." Okay, well, let me fix that so it's safe on the road, right? So imagine yourself as an auto mechanic or an astral mechanic in this capacity, and think about all we can learn there. Okay. What is the astral schematic? Now, this is a fancy way of saying an astrological chart, right? But sometimes language is a blessing and it gives us a little bit of a different vision. Okay, so our vision of a chart now is a schematic diagram. What is a schematic? Well, a lot of professions use them. I think architects use a schematic, like a blueprint could be considered a schematic. A electrical engineer might use a schematic to tell where the electricity is flowing in a system. Uh, yeah, several places. You guys might want to Google schematic and see what you find, and look at all the schematics of all the different professions. And then you realize, oh my gosh, I'm an astrologer and we have a schematic. One of the reasons I don't love the fight over house systems is because it blurs the schematic. It's like, can you imagine astro or like or car auto mechanics be like, "Well, I'm looking at this electrical diagram for the Saab 9000," and the other guy's like, "Well, I like this one better." It's like it's kind of like I don't know. So, but I'm a whole sign houser, but that's only because in the Greek text, the whole signs are the basic thing. They do overlay other signs, but it would be like the basic is whole sign and then the others are overlays on it. Okay, so you could take your schematic and be like, "Here's the basic schematic, and then I'm going to overlay some information on it." Totally fine, totally fine. I want you to leave here with a really strong idea that a chart is a schematic diagram. And so we want to keep the cleanest, simplest schematic we can. And really, a lot of what we look at is not even houses in remediation, it's aspect clusters. So you can kind of like lose the house problem and just be like comfortable with your schematic and be like, "This is an electrical diagram." I think this is, and you know what it is? It's the electrical diagram of the aura, the chakras, and something called dermatomes. So I don't know, there's a lot of smarties in here. So I'm sure some of you guys know what dermatomes are. You should Google dermatomes. Chiropractors know what they are. The kinesiologists know what they are, massage therapists. They're swaths of electromagnetic nervous tissue that goes through the body. And you know how they say like Gemini rules the arms? Well, there's a nerve root to Gemini and it comes out and it goes down the dermatome right down to the fingers. And so the Gemini's type because their dermatomes are really busy. They're electromagnetically lit up in this dermatome. And their throat chakra spins a lot, Gemini. We have tons of planets in Gemini right now. So it's like, well, when Jupiter's in Gemini, we all start get a spinning throat chakra. And then we're all like ready to type some more and we're ready to talk some more. That is actually a machine. The chart is a map of a machine. Now, this is where that we can understand the fates of astrology and allow for free will. We can say your machine is built like XYZ. Your throat chakra is built to spin in 2024 when Jupiter goes in Gemini. And though we can always fix or alter our machine, just like a car, right? A Saab is fated to look like a certain thing because that's the design of a Saab. But we can also take that Saab and work with it. Okay, so hopefully this is helpful. And I hope that looking at the chart as an astral schematic gives you a very kind of scientific lens on it and really makes you feel empowered that you are a mechanic looking at an electrical diagram and that you have a lot you can do with this thing. Okay. What other jobs use a schematic for what? That's a Google rabbit hole you guys can go down because I think when we look at other people who use schematics, we realize, oh, we are actually awesome. Astrologers are awesome. We are using schematics. We are looking into auras and things like that. So one book this makes me think of is Hands of Light this woman was a doctor, an actual MD, and she got a head injury. And then all of a sudden she could see auras and she could see disease starting in the auric plane and then going down into the body. And astrologers know that. We assume that you grow on a helix of light. And when the transits come in, they cause disruptions in that helix of light that then translate down to the physical body and things like that. So this reading books like Hands of Light can really get you into like this astral diagram is actually looking into this auric machine. And I think it's really, really fun and empowering. Okay. Now, here's another journal prompt or homework for you. Think to yourself, what kind of non-astrological remedies do you naturally use for emotional issues or physical issues? A lot of us in this room are healers already, even without astrologers. Let's say your friend comes to you and they're crying, just for any reason. What do you do? What is your style? How do you help? And the reason I want us to all make our own list here is because each of our chart will help in a different way. Okay, so let's say we have a presentation of crying. Okay, and we look in the chart and we see a moon in Pisces conjunct Venus, Mars in Pisces natally, and Saturn's going over it by transit. And we're like, oh, I can see the crying in the system. It's kind of funny to be a scientist about it. But yeah, you're like, I can see the crying in the system. It's going to last for 3 months and then it will back up and it will come back for 4 months later. Okay, it's like so we're like doing the timing of the crying and all this kind of stuff. But if you didn't have that information, you would still try to help the crying friend. Okay, so I want you to really look at yourself as a healer already. And what you might give them a hug. You might squeeze them and tell them you love them. You might send them a bunch of text messages and just remind them how awesome they are. You might play them a song. Songs are great remedies. It's like let's say we have the Aries person, the Sun, Mars, Mercury conjunction in Aries, and they're in a Mars return, and they're just like, whoa, oh my God, I'm so mad, blah, blah. And they're like swearing, they're just whatever. You're like, do you want to listen to some metal? How about this song like oh, go, 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 go. Like then they're just like, oh, that was awesome. I feel much better. Or like a song can always match the energy of a chart depending on what the presentation is. So some of you might be healers as you guys, some of you might be therapists. And there you can actually heal people through whole transits. You can say, I can see the crying might last. I mean, you might not tell them this. You might not say that the crying is going to last for 6 months, okay? But you might make a mental note to yourself like, oh, I see this transit's tough. Okay, we're going to process this for 6 months. Okay. So a therapist is kind of somebody who can help you process through the whole transit. But I tell you, there's some people who hit transits through massage. If we can actually get the dermatomes and the fascia and the certain things to release, for example, okay, let's say you have a Saturn in Leo and it's pinching your lower lobe of your lung and you're getting asthma in the lower lobe of the lung. Now, why do I say that? It's a long story. I'm a medical, I mean, it's not that I'm a medical astrologer, but I study remedies of everything physical through, spiritual. But let's say Saturn's in Leo and it's pinching your heart chakra and it's pinching the lower lobe of your lung. Well, let's say that heart problem where you're just like, I'm too humble. I'm just like, oh, I hate myself. Saturn's in Leo. I hate myself. I'm just not very good. I'm just like a total zero or whatever. Well, we would say it's actually that pinch on your heart chakra that's actually causing that from the inside out. So we might have a massage therapist go in and reconstruct the fascia around your heart chakra. And that would actually release the chakra. And all of a sudden you're like, well, I'm not so bad. And like, maybe I'm kind of awesome. Like my heart chakra spinning. So sometimes we actually attack an emotional transit somatically. Astrologers are psychosomatic experts. Okay. So it's like Galen, this old medical guy in Greece, would say the mind's inclination follows the body's temperature. The mind's inclination follows the body's temperature. So let's say somebody's super Aries and they are really mad right now. They're really mad and they're in a transit. Well, they're too hot. Okay. So like that chart gets hot. So maybe we remedy that emotional problem by saying, can you take off a few layers and stand in this air conditioning, please? Like, I mean, it's just like it's that simple. We might actually remedy an anger issue with cool air. Okay. So the point of this slide is there are a million ways to attack a problem. And you will have your own set of expertise. You will have your own style. So the homework for this prompt is write yourself a list of 20 things you could do to help someone just in general, and then think about how you could apply that to a chart. Okay. Now we're going to actually go to the textbook and just read the page on what is astrological remediation. So I'll show you what the page looks like in the book. It just looks like this. So it says, astrological remediation is the use of the schematic language of celestial energies to heal and soothe the spirit. Okay, the important thing here is it's the use of the chart to help or heal. Okay, we would think that everyone uses the chart to help and heal. Is that true? Think to yourself. Were you trying to use the chart to help and heal? Probably you were. I know early in my days I would tell people about a T-square before I knew remediation and just leave them on their way, and I don't think that helped or healed. But I do think, sometimes we just look at the chart for novelty's sake. But for this study, we're going to be trying to help and heal. Astrological remediation is the act of healing the energy body through the use of the astral schematic. Okay, so I mentioned hands of light, and she says disease actually comes in the energy body first and then goes down to the body physically. Well, we might try to heal things in the aura before they become physical. If you do astrological remediation right, you actually hardly ever get sick physically. Because what the ancients would say if you use your chi as it's meant to be used, you never get into a state of disease. Okay, so for example, let's say we had this Aries person with the Sun, Mars, Mercury, and Aries, and they're just like, listen, they're just like, oh my God, I'm just getting so angry, and we're like, all right, can you be the announcer for the World Wrestling Federation, please? Because Mars is on this thing, and you really need to do some fierce talking. And so they start just talking about the wrestling, and all the chi comes out. Okay, it no longer is sticking in the throat. If we didn't have that chi coming out, they might have had a huge goiter, like throat problem. If you look at a Mars Mercury conjunction, it can cause a sore throat. It can cause a buildup of iron in the throat chakra. And we're actually attacking the energy body with activities to run the chi. So if on every transit to that they start doing their job, their fate that they are here to partake in, they will not get sick. Okay, call me crazy, but I grew up with a mom who was a Christian Scientist, and these are the moms who don't really believe in taking you to the doctor. And what that taught me is that you can heal the body through the spirit. That's what the belief it set in me. But you can actually learn this through astrological remediation. Another thing, let's see, like the energy body. Well, I don't know. Well, let's keep going. Okay. Astrological remediation is the use of the symbolic language of floating vibrations in order to alter hard vibrations into more harmonious ones. Okay, so we're studying vibrations, actually. And let's say somebody's in a really weird transit, they might send out a really weird vibration. Okay, so have you ever stood next to somebody and you're just like, oh my God, your vibes are awful? And it's like they can't even help it because of the transit they're in. Their transit is malefic. Okay. Well, think about how you heal bad vibes. You can cut bad vibes with music. Like you put an amp in front of that thing and you blow it out with some like, beautiful music or something like that. You can cut vibes. So think of yourself as dealing with vibes a lot of the time. Astrological remediation can take on the form of anything in the earthly realm that will soothe and heal the specific needs of an individual's soul. Whether the method be allopathic, astrological, artistic, cerebral, etc. Is an allopathic doctor a remedy? Absolutely. Okay, sometimes you take your car to the mechanic and they're like, well, we have noticed that the engine has bottomed out of this car, and I'm not an expert in that. I need to send it over to my friend John over in Northwest, and he specializes in bottomed out engines. Okay, mechanics do this all the time. They send cars out to different places. And so sometimes if somebody has a persistent kidney problem in the chart, do we have to fix that? That would be a little bit out of our scope of practice. Okay. You can try energetically. You'd be like, I'm playing music to your kidney. Or like, there's videos. You could find binaural beats on kidney repair. You can actually listen to certain frequencies that will repair a kidney. My old metal producer would do this. He had a huge amp and like you would sit on the amp and he would blow people up with music and he would be like, oh, is there something wrong with your kidney? And then he would play binaural beats through his amp, like so it would go all through your body. Like you can actually heal a organ with frequencies. And though, because this might come through one transit at a time over and over again, what we might want to do is set the person up so that they have their own amp at home and they can blow binaural beats through their kidney problem one transit at a time. Okay. That might be tiring. They might want to say, I want to see the kidney specialist and get on an allopathic med. And that is totally valid. Okay. Astrological remediation is the study of understanding and altering a person's vibrational makeup in order to help or heal or soothe that person. Okay, the first thing we're understanding is that they have a chart that does things. Okay, so let's say we have a person with a violence problem. The what most people would say is like, well, you are in a cyclical cycle of violence, and what the cycle is you do something violent, and then you say you're sorry, and that it will never happen again, and then it happens again. And they're like shocked by this. And the astrologer's like, transits. Oh, the cyclical aspect of a transit. Like we are the experts in cyclical problems. Okay, so but the fact that we can understand that they have a moon square Pluto Mars, it's like we are understanding that system like the back of our hand. We're like, okay, I can time your violent outbursts. I mean, there's a lot of ethics around timing in the future, but we might go through the proving phase of proving it is in the chart, and then once they understand that, then we can time it in the future or whatever. But it's our job to understand the schematic more so much that we are like working with the schematic. We're doing everything we can. It's like, yeah, it's amazing. Okay, I'm almost done here. The astrological remediation is the study of astral mechanics in order to repair problems in the auric field. So sometimes there can be something in the natal chart that causes a problem in the aura. Okay, so let's go with that Moon Saturn conjunction. Let's say a Moon Saturn conjunction in Leo, not Capricorn. So the moon in Leo would create a spinning high heart chakra. There's the Leo, it's like the solar plexus and high heart. So it's like spinning, like we've got a warm spinning moon. And then Saturn in Leo pinches that chakra because Saturn will pinch the vertebrae wherever it is. So it's like we have this chart that's built to kind of want to spin a lot, but it's just stuck. It's like, so we if we could see auras, we might see a weird thing in the aura right here, you know. So what we would do is if you were an aura healer and you could feel and see auras, you might heal that thing. You might say, like, I need to heal the disruption in your chakra right here. Okay. But we know that on another transit, that thing's going to start spinning weird again because that's a natal aspect. This is why it's fated. Okay. And don't fool yourself to think that astrology means nothing or that it's not like epic to say that someone has this, because genetics, this is like being a genetic counselor. They would call the chart, are you ready for this? Genesis. Okay, yeah, that's why I want to take the astrology and sacred literature. Genesis. Okay, the chart is your Genesis. Okay, and that would be saying, like, in when you say there's something in a chart, it's like saying you have something in your genetics, your Genesis, that is there forever. So this Saturn Moon conjunction in Leo is going to be there forever. That's the fate of it. But we're going to handle it, but we might heal it on one transit and then it comes around again. And like now we have to heal it again and then it comes around again. So a lot of what we're going to do when you get advanced in remediation is you teach people how to heal their own difficult aspect so they can be their own auto mechanic. Okay. I wish I could be like, if we were at the Moyer Press School, I'd be like, any questions, any discussion, because I know I'm talking a lot, but okay. Now, goals of astrological remediation. One would be to strengthen the character and will. This is us just teaching the chart to the person, like, these are your fates. Like, you have all these gifts, and you have this one rogue aspect of personality. It's just one part of your personality that's cranky or whatever. But the rest of you is all these gifts. So you're kind of strengthening their character by teaching them their chart. You open the heart to its highest wisdom. In teleology, we ask a person, what are you here for? What are you growing and why? For example, I'll use myself as an example, not because I'm a narcissist, but because I have permission to use my own chart. Okay, so I have a Sun, Mercury, square Mars. Okay, and people are always like, be nice, Andy, be nice. And I'm like, I'm like, I get these transits and like, I just get all cranky. But the thing is, I am built to solve some problems. You know how cranky I got before I wrote Remediation, which is healing hundreds and hundreds of charts around the world? I mean, is I had to get that cranky before I did all the writing of the book, right? So it's like I would say that my highest wisdom is that I have this aspect of personality for a reason. Okay. Now, I want you to ask yourself about that burly aspect of personality that you wrote down. What is the highest wisdom of that aspect? Okay, if you have a Moon Saturn conjunction in Capricorn, the wisdom might be that I am boundaried and I know where I'm not emotionally like a fluid, like I'm not like just attaching to everyone around me. I don't have bad boundaries. I have grand boundaries. Oh my gosh, I'm here to be a school administrator. Duh. It's like, what is the highest wisdom of this aspect of personality? Is the first question to ask yourself. Because the first thing we want to ask is, how is our chart perfect? Okay. If this Sun Mercury Mars conjunction in Aries, of course the mother of that child was dealing with a really burly, constantly swearing when he's young and saying like, oh, get fuck, when he's young, you're just like, what am I gonna do with this creature? Well, he might be one of the best ultimate fighter commentators that ever lived, right? So we have to say, what is the highest wisdom of this aspect of my personality? Okay, number 3. This one is huge. Optimizing the physical constitution. Okay, we can actually take a chart and take every aspect of that personality and fix the dermatomes and chakras so that that chart functions perfectly. A basic example of this would be the moon sign and the appetites to the moon sign. Okay, I'm going to say something a little controversial here. Not every chart can be a vegetarian. Okay, A lot of really strong proponents of vegetarianism think that you can feed any baby vegetarian food and it will thrive because you can get proteins here and there. We would say a chart with 15 planets and fire signs actually needs protein because it's super, super muscular. Okay. And if you don't feed it, it won't have an optimized physical constitution. Um, let's say there's a chart that's like 50 planets in Taurus. That is going to collect weight no matter what it eats because it's growing on a helix of light that is trying to collect weight. It's beautiful and perfect just how it is. Okay. So with this person, we can, teach them to eat artisanal foods. If let's say there was a real health concern, we could say like you can express your Taurus, desires through these artisanal foods that are more on the healthy side. And like you can try to work with diet is a big one. I think there's a dance in that chart about like you're perfect just how you're made and don't try to lose weight and look like a different chart. And then like, okay, if there's we knew to do harm reduction, right? Like let's say then we're like, okay, trick your body and eat like an air sign, which is like eating green leafy vegetables all day. Like, so we're like dancing with each chart. Each one's different. Okay. But other ways to optimize the physical constitution, I like to handle people's Saturn. Okay. Um, as I've mentioned, Saturn will clamp down on a certain part of the spine. I worked with an astrokinesiologist for years. You can look up the book. It's called Astral Somatica, and that's on Amazon. And that was written with me and this astrokinesiologist named Casey Cardoso. And Casey knows all about the spine and the vertebrae and the dermatomes and everything like that. And we would do tests on people's spine. We'd say, like, what's your Saturn degree? And we would go down the spine and we could feel it. At the Saturn degree, there's a spinal root, and the fascia around the spinal root is just clamped tight. Okay. So all the dermatomes that come out of that spinal root are tight. We call those the rings of Saturn in a person. So let me give you an example. We had a case of a Saturn in Gemini, and it was conjunct Mars. So Mars sends out inflammation into a part of the body, and Saturn tightens that part of the body. So this person had chronic inflammation right here. The Gemini vertebrae are right here, and they go down around the throat and down the arm. Okay. This person had trapped inflammation right here. They had TMJ to the point that they couldn't open their jaw. Okay. And they were going to go in and do surgery on that thing, where they cut a tendon right here. And this was when Saturn was in Sagittarius and it was opposite the Mars Saturn. So right by transit, they like locked up basically. And we're like, oh my God, it's right on time. This is going to go on for 6 more months. Like, what are we going to do? So what Casey did was go into the fascia of that Saturn and Gemini back here in the neck and rework the fascia, basically Rolfed it. So Rolfing is where you rework the fascia. And all of a sudden the jaw released. Okay. And we have done this on countless Saturn problems. But basically what we do with a Saturn that's really rogue is Casey would hit it for like 12 weeks in a row where, you can get a massage anywhere on your body, but if they massage your Saturn spot over and over again, once a week for 12 weeks, you can actually reconstruct years of transits that have been building up, basically. So this can actually release this person's jaw, and now they can move their jaw just like, oh, like that, because we went back into where the chart had, you know, tightened the fascia. Now, you might be wondering, like, how can the chart get in there? Like, this seems impossible. Well, I'll tell you how the ancients thought it got in there. When a baby's growing, and I know this from a book called Ensoulment, which is about how the soul gets in the body. And basically it says when the baby's in there, the mother respires in the baby's soul. So the moms are doing this. And they're breathing in the chart, essentially. Sun vapors are a big part of ancient astrology. All the stuff coming off the sun that we breathe in is part of how the chart gets in us. So anyway, so breathing it in. Now let's say and it takes a year to grow a baby. They say it takes 1 full sun cycle. Like the baby comes out at 9 months, but then it has 3 months of still growing before it starts like doing everything. And we would say that it needs to grow all of its body systems with the sun going through all 12 signs. Well, when it goes through the sign where the Saturn is at birth, the mom's respiring in the baby, but the Saturn cuts off light. So when sun goes over Saturn, we get a light, the light is limited. So that spinal root develops in a limited fashion in the utero. And so when we come out, we have a tight spine in the Saturn area. That's what we would call the root of the soul. It's actually there for a reason because we're perfect, remember? Remember, there's something that needs to pucker us up. Okay, so if you have Saturn and Gemini and you hear somebody like speaking in a grating fashion, you're like, I don't know about that. It's like the constant editor, the Saturn and Gemini person. Their throat chakra is built to spin a little bit slower and be a little bit more defensive. Their arms are built to move a little bit slower, so they type slower and in a more contrived fashion. Right? If you have Mars and Gemini, you're like, I'm typing so fast, I don't even edit what I say. I just don't edit it ever. Like, so they're just built for a different reason. But if you have Saturn in Cancer, it might compress the water around your lung. If you have Saturn in Aries, you might get eye strain because it's compressing the part of your body around your Aries. So part of optimizing the physical constitution is to go in and fix all the stuff that is in the physical constitution that's wrong. Okay. Okay, a big one we do in astrological remediation is enhance the communicative process in the personal narrative. Okay, what planet are we dealing with here? Mercury. Okay, Mercury problems are a huge one you're going to help people with. Um, so there are several Mercury problems. Okay, let's say we have a Mercury-Mars conjunction. I remember one class I taught, and I had twins, astro twins in my class with Mercury-Mars conjunctions. One of them swore all during class every day, and the other one kept yelling at me. And I was like, oh my God, you're perfect. You're doing your chart. It's so awesome. But of course, I was like, I'm getting yelled at, whatever. But so a Mercury and Mars conjunction can be fierce and constantly yelling and doesn't stop talking and just always has to make an argument. And like, so, okay, so that's a communicative process we can help someone with. And in that one, with Mars problems, we definitely want channeling of energy. We don't like to suppress Mars energies at all. So we would get them into like being an auctioneer. We're like, where your job is to like be like this and like we definitely want to give them a job where they are supposed to talk a lot. Um, okay, and there's a lot of other things we can do. Mercury Saturn conjunction. Okay, what's the problem here? The throat chakra is literally closed, like where it's supposed to be spinning, it's kind of tight. We get oppressive quietness. These people won't talk at all. Sometimes when they do talk, they are kind of negativistic. They're always like thinking like this, like everything is like this, and like, they're really good at patterning, like they can memorize by rote things. They love math and science and logic problems. But see how we have to see what is the problem in the life, then what is the natal aspect, and then what are we going to do as a mechanic to fix it? So it's like I'm giving you examples of what things could be, but there's also, it depends on what's presenting in the life case. Mercury Jupiter conjunction. Now, of course, squares and stuff are same. I'm just using conjunctions for purity of examples, but a Mercury Jupiter conjunction is largely very awesome, very funny, but they talk a lot. When they're talking about something, they talk like this, and they just don't stop talking. And they're like learning stuff, and then they're learning all this stuff, and then they're telling you all this stuff, and so okay, that's a beautiful Mercury. And though, let's say they had a partner who had a Mercury Saturn conjunction. Well, this actually becomes a problem where one person's hyper-expressed and one person's under-expressed. One person talks all the time and one person won't say anything. So in that relationship, we want to enhance the communication process and the personal narrative. We might have the Mercury Saturn person respond in an email. So the Mercury Jupiter person can say what they think, then they separate, and then the Mercury Saturn person writes an email. Okay, that would be an example of a remedy. But you see how there's countless remedies. You're probably thinking, well, I would have done X, Y, Z. And that is correct. We all can remedy these things in several ways. Okay. Maximize the magnitude and scope of manifestation. Okay. So lately, my team's been watching The Secret. Anyone seen The Secret? Okay. This is manifestation theory. Okay. Now, to be honest, astrology is ancient manifestation theory. Okay, if that doesn't blow your mind, I don't know what does. This is like watching The Secret written 2000 years ago. Okay, so what we're actually supposed to do with our clients and ourselves is work towards mega manifestation. Okay, so basically what you're supposed to do is maximize the magnitude and scope of manifestation. Even on these kind of hard aspects of personality, we're actually supposed to mega manifest these into appropriate contexts. And in this way, we stay perfect. Okay, if we have the Moon Saturn conjunction and we say, oh, this person is so closed off and so cold, and I don't know what I'm going to do with them, we're like, let's put him in, let's have him be the principal of the school. Okay, now they can maximize their manifestation and use that Moon Saturn for what it was built for. And now they are not underexpressed. Okay, so what I hope you guys take from this is that you can maximally manifest every single transit to your chart. And we're going to teach you how to do this in a way that isn't as problematic as you thought that aspect was. Okay. Now, this is an extremely important point. What is an aspect cluster and why is it important to astrological remediation? Okay, I want you to look at a chart a little bit differently after this. We are working with clusters of aspects. Okay, the ancients will call your chart your song of life. And any musician knows that a song is created from a few different chords. Like maybe there's 4 chords in a song or 5 chords in a song. Some songs are 1 chord. But an astrologer knows that any chart has about 4 or 5 aspect clusters. And most of the time, what we get in remediation is an aspect cluster that's acting kind of weird. Like that rarely does the whole chart act weird. It's just usually one little aspect cluster. Okay, so whoever asked me about their Saturn and Pisces opposed to Venus, Uranus, Pluto, that's an aspect cluster. All those planets are played at the same time in the Song of Life. So when the transits go around, it's like this gets played, then we go over here to this one, then we go over here to this one. So homework you can do is run the moon around your chart for 1 month and think, what is that 28-day cycle of my aspect clusters? How does that play out? A square gets hit once a week in the unfolding of a month. The sun goes around once a year, so every 3 months the square gets hit. Mars goes around every 2 years, so a square gets hit every 6 months. Okay, so you can I want you to start understanding your chart in aspect clusters because as remediation artists, we want to focus in on that aspect cluster and wrangle that like a mechanic. Okay, a lesson for you is to explode the diagram, make an exploded axon. Okay, so while you're sitting there listening to me, Google exploded axonometric. Architects use these all the time. So imagine if we drew a whole building on 1 page. How specific can we get? Not very specific. We just see a big building and that's all. Architects, sometimes I'm like, when I had the exploded axon epiphany, I was just like, why didn't astrologers know this before? Like, it's just like architects know this. Like, you put 1 floor on each piece of paper in the blueprint, but you have the whole building on 1 paper, which we have our whole chart on 1 paper all the time. Then you explode it out into 1 aspect cluster on each wheel. So when I'm working with clients, I will have sometimes I'll make a diagram, I'll just hand draw it and I'll be like, okay, your Moon Saturn conjunction's on this wheel, and then your Sun Mercury Mars conjunction in Aries is on this wheel. Those could exist in the same person. Isn't that crazy? And then your Saturn opposed Venus, Uranus, Pluto's on this wheel, and then your Mercury trine Jupiter's on this wheel. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do is explode your chart out into wheels and put 1 aspect cluster on each wheel. Now, how do you know what's an aspect cluster and what's not? Well, run the moon over it and say, how long does it take the moon to hit all these planets? And you're like, okay, all these planets unfold in a 12-hour period. Okay, that's 1 aspect of my personality because it comes out in a 12-hour period. Okay. But charts, some of them meander. Some of them have Mars at 5 and then something at 8 degrees and then something at 11 degrees. And that's just a slow unfolding aspect. This part unfolds and then this unfolds and then this unfolds. So you can kind of study the anatomy of the aspect cluster. You're like, okay, this is a slow unfolding conjunction. Okay. People ask me about orb, and I'm like, well, look at the unfolding process. How long does it take to manifest that aspect? So if the moon's at 3 and that Mars, Mercury in Aries is at 10, we're like, okay, so the moon hits that 3 degrees in the morning. So they're all feisty inside. They're like, oh, I can't sit still. My moon in Aries is up. I'm pissed. I'm mad about something. And then so 7 degrees later would be 14 hours later. Then for the next 14 hours, they go Mercury Mars conjunction. And now they're just swearing and they're just talking. And like, so that takes 14 hours to unfold that aspect of personality, right? So I think you want to put these on different wheels and then really study the anatomy of your aspect and say, what does my unfolding look like here? Okay. Now, how can we watch aspect clusters in real time to understand their effects? People always think you should be able to remedy your chart overnight. Like you go to this lecture and then you're like, okay, now I'm remedying my chart. Okay, it's not really that easy because there's a process. It usually takes my students about a year or two of watching their transits and watching the unfoldment of them and saying, ooh, I like this, or I don't like this, or this happened on that and I didn't like that, or I liked this, or so the first thing we want to do is watch the unfolding of our aspects in real time. I meet a lot of astrologers who say like, "Oh, I don't watch transits. I'm not a transit watcher," and all this stuff. And I'm like, "Well, that would be like saying like I don't look at the clock ever. Like I don't need to tell time." To me, watching the transits is literally learning to tell time. We're looking at what my mentor Judith Hill would call qualitative time. What is it, the quality of the time? So somebody who has a Moon Saturn conjunction in the same chart as a Sun Mercury Mars might need to know what time it is. Oh my God, it's time for me to be cold and have boundaries right now. Oh, today it's time for me to go off and do some sports commentating. Today it's like we have to see what time is it so we know what we're supposed to do. Let's look at bipolarism, one of the most amazing things we can help people with. Astrologers are experts in multipolarism. Like, are you kidding? Like, all the doctor can say is like, well, sometimes you'll be up and sometimes you'll be down. And we're like, and the astrologer's like, well, I see that you'll be up. You'll be thinking you can do anything in the world for the next 14 hours, and then you'll plummet into a state where you feel like you can do nothing. Okay, like I'm not trying to sound like joking, but it's actually that specific. So we can actually time people's manias or help them learn to tell time for their manias. And what we're trying to do is learn what can we do with our manias. To me, a mania wasted was a mega manifestation moment gone. Like I use every mania that goes through my chart. I mean, how do you think I wrote this lecture? It was on a mania. It's like I use every energy that I ever have for what it was built for. Okay. We never want to do something at one time when we should be doing something at that. It's not time for that. Like, don't ask me to write a lecture when I'm not in the mood. It's not time for that. Okay. So part of remedy theory is working to our chart. And the ancients would say that if you work to your transits, you feel like you're flying and you never work a day in your life. So it's really important to learn to watch aspect clusters in real time. Now, what does this look like? Let's say you have a Jupiter square. Jupiter square Venus is a fun aspect of personality that causes some problems. And what are the problems? Ask yourself, what's the problems with a Venus square Jupiter? Too much partying, too much sugar, too much fun, too much socializing. And of course, we're thinking, oh, I would love to have that problem. Well, it's like I have a Venus square Jupiter and I love that problem, except like I have to explain it to my mom, my dad, my doctor, and look, why everyone, like, I was like, why did I need to party for 16 hours? I don't know. But anyway, of course, I've learned to party in a sober fashion because that's a remedy for a chart like that. But I would tell you that if you're going to watch a Venus square Jupiter, the first thing you want to do is watch a transit to it in real time. So let's say the next transit we saw was a Venus that was going to hit it. Okay, so the Venus is going to trigger the Venus square Jupiter. So a Venus that would be coming to here or coming to here. Well, then you want to wait for when the moon's in that pocket and see the moon triggering it too, because then you really get to see the aspect in pure form. Now, maybe Jupiter comes on it because Jupiter will be on it every 3 years. So we could call that a party year or whatever, or a social year or a fan building year or whatever. So let's say Jupiter's on that square. Well, then you might wait for other planetary triggers and then the moon. And on those days, you're like, oh, I saw my Venus Jupiter square. And you know what I was doing? I could not stop Facebooking. I had to Facebook all day long. Okay. And so we would say, oh my gosh, God built you to Facebook all day long. Fan building. Oh my God, you're supposed to be really popular. Oh my God, that's the highest, So part of what this watching phase of watching our problematic aspects of personality is to seeing what visions we get. What are we supposed to be doing? What do the gods want us to do on that aspect? And you can actually start naming them. You can be like, so the burly combative Sally came up yesterday, and I realized that I liked watching professional boxing. And I had a party where all my friends came over and we yelled at the TV screen. That was fun. Or maybe it'll happen that you yell at your neighbor and then you're like, "Ooh, I yelled at my neighbor and that was bad. I didn't like that expression." So we start watching the aspect clusters in real time. Like if you have a Mars cluster, you might want to wait till you have a Mars return to it and be like, oh my God, I was doing X, Y, and Z. I couldn't stop running. I couldn't stop, X, Y, and Z. So the first project I want to give you guys is start watching your aspect clusters in real time. And you remember, you want to get the planet in orb and then the moon triggering it. That's a pure energy, right? The chi is in there, and then the chi of the moon comes up in there too. Okay. Now, I need to pause a moment and talk about visions. So in manifestation theory, people are supposed to vision. Like if you're scared of something, you're supposed to create a vision of the thing you want. Let's say you're scared, you're like, I don't want to get beat up. You're like, okay, I'm going to create a vision of like, I am safe and healthy. I am safe and healthy. I am safe and healthy. Okay, that's a visioning trick. Well, the ancients knew all about the vision part of manifesting. And in fact, they would say that the visions we are shown shows what we are growing into. So when I have a transit coming up to a part of my chart, and I've been watching my transits for 24 years, and I still do this. Recently, the Moon Mars conjunction in Aries was hitting my chart in a really burly way. It was hitting my Sun square Mars, and it from the 11th, and I was like, oh no. But I never get scared. I'm just like, oh no, better be watching. So what happened was when the Moon Mars got exact, all I could do was thinking, I need to go on a lecture tour. I need to go on a lecture tour. I need, because it was in the 11th. I need to go out in front of the groups. I need to go out in front of the groups. So I'm like, lecture tour, lecture tour, lecture tour. And like the vision was like obsessive. I couldn't relax. I couldn't, that's the Moon Mars of it. I like couldn't relax, right? Well, if I would have been like, calm down, Andy, you need to calm down. Okay, that is not using the energy for what it was built for. What I had to do was hearken the visions coming to me and be like, all right, this is what this transit is for. While Mars is burning on my Sun square Mars, I need to contact every astrology association I can get to, or whatever, because that is what my chart is trying to manifest. A lot of the times we get into problematic use of our aspects, it's because we are not using the visions that are coming to us. We're denying them. One of the problems that happens with charts is we can have a really hard aspect, but we can be sitting in an office in a cubicle and we're in a mania and we're like, then we snap at our coworker. Well, it's because our chart actually wants to be out manifesting this other thing and it can't because we're in a cubicle. The ancients would say you can die under the machine of another person. That means if you're not allowed to live to your transits, you can actually die because the chi gets all messed up, right? So I think the first remedy we want is to learn what our aspect clusters are wanting from us and express that, okay, in a healthy fashion, which we'll get to. Okay. What is the proving phase and why do we use this in the astrological remediation? Okay, I learned this from a student of mine who was a therapist, and they would do a proving phase when certain things happened. And I don't remember what they do in therapy, but I realized that we need to do a proving phase when we're working with a client. Okay, let's go back to the violent. Let's say we have a couple who loves each other very much. They have a beautiful composite chart. They are truly alchemically in love. And though there's a violence issue in the relationship, they keep erupting into violence. Well, let's say we look at their charts and they both have Mars at 13 Aries. One of them has it conjunct the moon and the other one has it square the sun. We're like, oh my God, this is caused by both charts being full of iron at the same time. Both charts are aggravated at the same time. Um, and we need to prove to them that this is cyclically going to occur over and over according to their charts, and they need to do something about it. Okay, we can see it, and if we showed another astrologer, we'd be like, do you see this? And we'd be like, we can see the problem, we know what the problem is. But we have to actually prove that to the client. A lot of times they don't even believe in astrology. They think we're making it up. We think it's that we said something. You guys, I've watched transits double blind for years, and you can read about this in the book, the textbook. We'd actually did experiments, and I had a student replicate my study. Transits are happening on the chi level when people don't even know they're happening. I don't think that we are making them happen by talking about them. Okay. So what I believe is happening is those dermatomes are getting full of iron and these people are literally they can't calm down. Okay. So what I would say is we need to prove to them that the charts at work and that we can actually see the problem, predict the problem, and help them in the future. Now, this phase is bananas. Like I've tried to figure out how to prove stuff. Like I'm like, like every case I have to think about like how am I going to prove this? Now, if they already believe in astrology, it's a lot easier, because you can just be like, okay, it's definitely that aspect. But sometimes it might be that I'm texting them at the time that a transit's hitting it, and I'm like, are you crabby right now? Are you guys fighting right now? Like, and the timing is really important because you like gotta get them right when the transit's happening, and then they're like, how did she know? And you're like, I was remote viewing. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm not kidding. I think astrologers are remote viewers from an emotional perspective, but basically we have to kind of prove to them that it is in the chart somehow. And I don't want us to forget this phase when we're working with people, because once they believe that it's bigger than them or that it's celestial or whatever, that they basically um it changes their world, because it shows them that this is bigger than them, and that this couple might be trying really hard to not get into violent aspects. And it might be that every other part of their chart is beautiful, and then they have this one violent aspect that they can't, and it might be fine. And then a Mars gets to it like every 6 months and they have a violent outburst and they actually get in a physical fight, right? So we might actually start timing. We'd be like, okay, this pocket, this 2 week pocket in July, I need you guys to separate and sleep in your own bedrooms. Okay, we need to separate the chi right here because the undercurrent is just too much. Or you guys need to take up martial arts together and start going into martial arts competitions where you're punching other people at this time, not each other. Or you choose to fight fair, or you're fighting. I just had a couple like this who would Mars at the same time, and I prescribed a bunch of books for them on conflict mediation, conflict resolution, how to fight fair. And I also taught them that when people are fighting, they're more productive and creative. People in Mars problems are actually very productive and they get a lot done. So, it's not all bad, but we do want to prevent physical altercations, non-consensual ones. It's like if you guys are going to be professional wrestlers, get in the ring. No. Okay. Journal prompt or homework. What is your philosophical framework for making decisions through transits? What are your core values? Okay, so I'll give you a second to write that down. So I'm going to present to you a few that exist. There's different philosophies through walking through challenging transits. The one that most of us know is from Robert Hand, because Planets in Transit is like the best astrology book ever written. Um, Temperance. If you notice what Robert Hand says about squares, like a Jupiter square, he'll say, don't overspend your money. Be careful of overspending and eating too much, which is a great prescription. Like, I really agree with the temperance idea, theoretically. Because I have studied manifestation so long and I understand chi, I know that that's very, very hard. And in fact, when you have a Jupiter square, like it doesn't really suffice the energy to be temperate. When a Mars transit's hitting you and what Hand would say is like, do not get in a fight right now. Wait until this energy has passed to get in a fight or whatever. And what we really know, if we're really looking, and this is why the Hellenists were really smart, is they knew that Mars produces shouting and shrieking. Like, you can't really avoid the energy. So I have a little bit of a different philosophy than Robert Hand, although I do read planets and transits on my transits all the time to just kind of philosophically get a good handle on it. And I just love that book, Planets in Transit. Okay. Another philosophy, which a lot of you might have been doing all this time, is to fade it out. You're like, I have a Mars transit. I'm just going to fade it out. I'm just going to live for whatever it's supposed to do. I get in a fight with my neighbor. Oh, well, that was what was supposed to happen. Okay. Um, I, I partied a lot, and that was supposed to happen when my Venus square Jupiter was hit. And it's like, okay, well, let's say we have a problem where the fading it out really doesn't work. Like you're drinking and driving, you are drinking in front of your kid, like all these things that a Venus square Jupiter might not be healthy. Like you can't really fade it out sometimes depending on the chart. Remediation. This would be handling it through remedies. So as we'll get to some remedies, you probably will like, what are the remedies? Well, I'm sorry I have to do all this to teach you how to think about it before we just talk about what are some of the remedies. But I would say that remediation, like, often we hear about wearing a gemstone. That's a classic one. And like, I'm a brutal remediation artist, so sometimes I'm like, yeah, that gemstone's not going to help you. I'm like, no offense, but it's like, it's not all gems around here. Okay. Like, I'm like, wait, we might need to brutally put you in martial arts or something like that. But there's a lot of remedies, but I think I love the remediation aspect of things where every transit we have to a hard aspect of personality, we apply remedy right in the transit. I'll give you an example. Okay. Let's say that TMJ case, the Mars Saturn conjunction in Gemini, where the jaw was locking up. Let's say we noticed every time Mars hit that aspect, we got a jaw lock every single time. And we're like, oh my God, I'm sick of this. I'm sick of this. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to schedule myself a massage therapy appointment on every Mars transit to my Mars Saturn. See how that's a remediation approach where like I'm actually going to schedule remedies right on time so I don't have to get TMJ. I can waylay the TMJ. Okay. Maybe with the Sun, Mars, Mercury conjunction in Aries, we're like, oh, there he goes, swearing, shouting, and shrieking every time. Okay, I'm going to schedule him to be the commentator for the WWF wrestling every time Mars hits that thing. I'm going to schedule him to work. Okay, so that's actually scheduling the remedy or the thing that works, and we schedule it for. That's why it's important to learn how to tell astrological time. Is like we want to know what time it's going to be so that we can schedule a remedy before it comes. Okay. Um, so maybe the Moon Saturn person has depression on transits to the like. Let's say there's a Saturn transit coming to the Moon Saturn conjunction, like the Saturn square is coming, and we're like, oh, that's when Mary starts crying all year. Oh man, that's going to be a crying year. All right, let's schedule her talk therapy for the duration of the transit. Okay, see how that's a remediation attitude towards the transits is we're going to actually schedule remedies. Now, mega manifestation is a remedy, okay, and it's my favorite use of the chart. Okay, so this would be when you do every transit to your chart full on in a healthy fashion. Okay, so let's say we had the Venus square Jupiter person, and like we're not going to take the temperance approach. We're like, all right, Jupiter's hit my Venus square Jupiter this year. I'm going to party with my Facebook crowd all year long and do fan building. And it's just like you wake up and you're just like, wait, what's up, everyone? Like, bam, 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 bam. Okay, so that's a mega manifestation. We're not trying temperance. We're trying to go all in on that transit. Um, if we have a Mars Jupiter conjunction in Aries and the person has Mars hitting it, we're like, let's train for that triathlon that you want to run. Let's run and run and run and run. Why don't you run 2 hours a day actually? Or why don't you train for a marathon? Yeah, your chart could do a marathon. You're that riled up. Let's go marathon. Okay. See how we're going mega. We're like, if there's something wrong with the aspect, go mega on that aspect. If we had that transit to the Moon Saturn conjunction in Capricorn, we're like, I know, set boundaries with every student in the school. Just be the boundary police all year long. Let's do sanctions in the school. Let's get rid of drugs. Let's do dare a dare program where it's like the drug program or something like, well, let's go boundaries core all year long. But we basically what we do is every transit that comes in, we're just like bam, bam, yeah. And then I booked astrology lectures, and then I did this, and then I partied with my crowd, and then I did this, and then I talked to my partner, and then I did this, and then I wrote an email. And see how it's in kind of, you're probably like a little annoyed with me. You're like, oh, really? You're just gonna always do that? And I'm like, yeah. And I haven't been sick in years. I don't think I've been sick I can't even remember the last time I was sick. So, I mean, I believe in moving chi, is what I believe the mega manifestation aspect works because we move the chi and we hearken our visions. Okay. Okay, this is actually perfect. We have 9 minutes, and I'm going to give you some methodologies that you can start working with. Now, of course, if you want to learn more, you can read this book. You can come find me and study with me for years. It like takes years to really get good at this stuff. But these are these are five that you can start with. Okay. Methodology, strategic planning. First thing we do, astrologers know about strategic planning. They call it electional astrology. And though electional astrologers do very sparse elections, they're like, I elected my wedding, I elected the start of my business. Okay, well, why did you use the clock twice in your life? Like, we strategic plan everything at the Moyer Press, everything. So it's like, okay, let's say you're going on a trip with your 2-year-old child and they have a Mars conjunct the moon. Let's not go on the car ride when the Mars is on the moon Mars. Let's just not do it. That would be bad planning. Okay, let's do strategic planning. Maybe the child also has a Venus Jupiter conjunction in Taurus. We're like, okay, let's go on the trip when Jupiter goes over that Venus Jupiter. Well, I don't know, or something like that wouldn't be possible. But you see what I'm saying is like you want to plan trips strategically, your daily job. Like, let's say you're an entrepreneur and you're an astrologer and you work for yourself. Plan your day to your chart. You know, let's say the moon is on your in your 11th house. You're like, I'm going out networking today. Then the moon goes to your 12th house. You're like, I'm going to clear my subconscious by talking to God in my journal. God, what is your will for my business? Okay. Then the moon goes into your first house. You're like, I'm going to go out and meet 10 new people. Then the moon goes to your second house. I'm going to deal with my books and finances. Then the moon goes to your third house. I'm going to write an article. You know, see what I mean? Where it's like we plan our day to our transits, and that's called strategic planning. If you're really building your own business, the joy there is that you get to work to your own machine. You get to work to your own chart. So you want to plan your day around what's going on in your chart. But yeah, use strategic planning for literally every single thing, but not, I mean, the weird thing is this seems extreme, but when you're a transit watcher, it's like, I always know what time it is. Like every day, I'm just like, okay, the moon's in Gemini right now, and it's going to conjunct Mars later. And that's on my chart in the XYZ way. And like, I have been called savant with like 6,000 charts. Like I'll be doing calculations for like 6,000 people. Like all my students are doing this. And like, but now of course I've learned to focus on each event. Like, what do I need to know for this event? What do I need to know for this event? Like we don't have to, I don't know, just strategically plan for what you need to, but use that is one remedy is planning around energies. Um, Number two, symbolic substitution. This is a huge one. Huge. Okay. What this is you give the planet what it wants symbolically, but you substitute a different activity or context for what was causing a problem. For example, let's say we have a little kid in school and they have a Moon Mars conjunction and they keep being antsy, they can't sit still, and they keep punching people. Okay, we're like, this is a problem child. This is a spirited child. Okay. Well, they're in the wrong context. They're in the wrong place for what they're trying to grow. Okay. That would be like a squash plant growing under the bright blazing sun and it starts wilting. Or like, have you grown lettuce under the bright sun? Ooh, that's not the right conditions for that plant to grow. Okay, so that kid needs to be put in a martial arts school with a sensei, right? Or maybe they need to be put in a military academy with a sensei, right? Or something where maybe they need to be taken into, like, where is it okay to hit people and yell? Like, oh, when you're against another person who hits people and yell, that's a fair fight. And they like, and what you'll find with these hypermartial churches, they're so full of iron that when you hit them, it doesn't even hurt them. They're like, I don't understand what the like. There's this wrestler named Schlack, and you'll see him. He has a really martial chart, and he'll bloodlet himself. Basically, he'll get hit on the head, and there's like blood spewing out, and we're like, oh, he probably is just like, ah. I feel so much better. That's like bloodletting was part of ancient medicine. And it's like that's because you fill up with iron and you just let out the blood, right? So it's like in for these gladiator type charts, it's like we got to get them in the right context so that they don't look like problem child. They can excel. These people could be Olympic athletes. This could be an Olympic wrestler. If you start him in an Olympic wrestling track from the age of 4, now we got a mega manifestation going. Now this plant is growing. Okay, so we can grow whatever the chart is trying to do. We just got to get in the right context. I'm trying to think of other symbolic substitutions. Okay, let's take a Mercury problem. The person's a talker. They talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. Okay, what is that trying to manifest? What is the highest glory of that? Being a writer. Okay. Once that kid gets a computer and a piece of paper, they're like, I remember my daughter has a hypermercury, and the day she learned to read, all of a sudden the energy, the chi calmed down in the back of the car. I was like driving, and I was like, do I seriously not feel chi right now? Oh my God, she's reading a book. Like, so that all of a sudden they start typing. They're starting to funnel all that talking into a book. You know how many words it takes to write a book? That's a talker. Talk like Danielle Steele talks a lot. You know what I mean? Stephen King talks a lot, okay? But those are hyper manifested charts. Okay. So symbolic substitution, there's a whole chapter in it in the book. It's a real involved study, but like you can do this for any problematic aspect. Gem remedy. Do I believe in them? Yes. Why? Intention number one. It's not just the gem, which they say it alters the aura, actually. But let's say we have somebody who won't talk. They have a Mercury Saturn conjunction. Well, lapis lazuli is a blue stone. This is a blue chakra. And the intention of the stone is to perfect your communication style. So if we gave this stone to the person, we'd say, we want and intend for you to talk. And we're going to put this on, you need to wear it on the chakra where the problem is, right? Like that Mercury Saturn conjunction right here, let's say if it's in Gemini, we would wear the blue stone around the neck. And it not only would set the intention that we want you to talk, but also hopefully would alter the aura into being more blue and would also help with the talking. Now, I'm more of a brutal structuralist where I would go and release that Saturn in the fascia and get the chakra spinning a little bit more. But you know, a lot of people are stone experts, and I think that there is a place for stone remedies in remedy theory. And there's a whole study, it's called Upayay. It's Upayyi. And in India, it's a whole study. And so, yeah, I think gem remedies are beautiful. But wearing them on the part of the body is really important. Like, let's say you have a Sun Saturn conjunction in Leo. So you're a Leo and you're trying to spin this heart chakra, but the Saturn is clamping down on it. Okay, we're like, remember to express yourself. Don't be too hard on yourself. Well, maybe we get them to wear a gold chain or some bling right in that. That's orange. It's an orange color that's being suppressed. So let's put gold and orange right on the orange. So bling, remember to bling, remember to shine, right? So see how there is an effect there. It's just, yeah, okay. Astral merging. This would be choosing a composite chart that fixes something in the natal chart. So let's say we have a Mercury Saturn conjunction and the person won't talk, but we get a composite chart that has a Mercury Jupiter conjunction. Now with this person, I can express myself. This person's like, for some reason, I can always talk with my partner. You know, that's a composite chart that fixes the natal aspect. If you have a Mars square Pluto in the natal aspect and you're kind of violent, we want a composite chart that's not violent. Like we definitely want one that has like Mars trine Venus. Oh, well, when I'm with my partner, I just don't need to fight. This would be the ultimate fighter who has a girlfriend and they just don't ever fight, you know? So astral merging is a big one. There's a chapter in the book on that. I only have 1 minute, so I'm trying to rush these. Astrally timed information. Oh, this is a big one. Okay, this is like the most magical one when you time stuff right to the transit. So like you see in your friend's chart that they're in a bad mood, and then you text them right on time. You're like, how's your mood right now? And they're like, how did you know to text me? I'm like, because in your chart and I can see, are you okay? Oh, like, you know, and it's like, we do astrally timed information all the time. This is part of the proving phase. That's when you text the person, you're like, are you being violent right now? And like, so remember, that's watching the clock and then just attending to things right when they're, and this is part of why, you know, I was trying to keep 6,000 charts in my head was in the earlier days of being, before I was more a teacher and I was more of a reader, it's like I was keeping track of all my clients and I'm like, I need to talk to them right now. Okay, oh, them, they're right now, they're going right now. Every chart pops at a different rate, you know, like this person might be popping and this person's just chilling and you're like, that's why the planets don't work. I'm like, well, they work, but it's just really individualized. And so astrally timed information is a big one too. um okay this lecture is a little bit longer, but anyway, I think I'll stop there.
We're loving this so much, so if you want to carry on, that's fine by me.
Yeah,
Best
I
of luck.
have to teach at noon, so I can because I want to take questions.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Andrea, for a brilliantly insightful and thoroughly entertaining presentation. I think many of us were literally laughing out loud as we're watching, so thank you so much. If
Yes.
you went on an astrology heavy metal tour, I'd be buying tickets.
Oh, well, you should watch my YouTube channel.
Okay, we'll put that in the link as well. I love it.
I play metal piano. Okay, I'll stop.
Oh, wow. Okay, now I'm definitely checking out. Wonderful. I'll apologize in advance. Do you have 10 minutes or so for a Q&A? Did you say 12 o'clock
I
your
have 20
time?
minutes. I can go 20. Yeah.
20 minutes, fantastic. I'll apologize in advance. We're not going to get to everybody's questions, but we do. I've rephrased a lot of these questions because some of them were quite common as they were coming in. Okay, into our Q&A. So we're talking here about overlaying charts. So in terms of using multiple house systems, say we have a particular T-square in whole sign, it's going to be in particular houses. Say we move to a quadrant house system, those houses are going to shift. Like, do you take into account the shift in houses? What are your general thoughts around that?
Great question. So, of course, I've had to figure out how to deal with this over the years, and I have chosen to stick with whole sign houses like as a theoretical choice because I don't like a waffling schematic. When I'm working with somebody, I just want to be like, all right, but I also have noticed whole sign houses work more consistently, and that was through a lot of research. And but now I do encourage people to test their own houses by that transit. You know, like when you have a Jupiter, let's say Jupiter's waffling between two houses. Watch when you get a Jupiter return, and then when the moon's on there, and see what your chart, what your mind is doing, what visions are you getting, and see which house you want to put it in. I mean, I think it's fine to pick one or the other, but also it's kind of fun to do the research of like, what is my chart, my soul doing here? But I always use whole signs, always.
Wonderful, thank you. And we have many people in the chat talking about T-squares, and we're not going to get into the specifics of the planets. But what do you have a general approach to T-squares, whether that's natally or whether by transit they're forming a T-square? What are your general thoughts, or maybe a general approach to mitigating T-squares or the
Good
issues
question.
that come?
So the first thing to know is the timing. That T square gets expressed once a week. The moon hits a T square once a week. So while it is a really intense aspect of personality, it's a mania aspect. You know, in manias, they say that feel like we can do anything and get really up and all this stuff. Well, a T square is just highly, highly energized. So, and remember that you can handle it because it only comes out once a week, and that's for 16 hours. The moon will only hit it for 16 hours, depending on the exact configuration. So, first thing is time it and remember pacing. You can handle anything for 16 hours. The second thing would be to say, what is my T square trying to manifest? Because most really successful people have T squares or they're highly juiced up parts of the personality. So we could say, what are the highest expressions of this T square? And then look at the houses. Of course, like there's two opposite houses. So we're saying maybe it's relationships and self. So I'm managing 1 and 7, like relationships and self and career. So I'm like, okay, I'm looking at relationships, self, and career. Like, so start with the houses and just be like, okay, what are these three things? And then you can add in the planets and you kind of start, you know, writing yourself delineations like these are possibilities. And then you watch it and you're like, oh, you know what happened was X, Y, Z. Okay, now I'm going to mega manifest that a little bit. So I would go for mega manifestation on those T squares once a week. And let's say you have a job, it might be hard to work when you're maniaing on your T square because you're like, I got a lot to do right now. It's like, oh my God, you know. So it's not bad. It's just really, it's really powerful, honestly. And so we might want to give ourselves space to work under the T square for whatever it's trying to produce.
Wonderful, thank you. It's like pressure can make the diamond. Absolutely wonderful. More of an interesting question here. How do you approach trust building if there is a lot of past betrayals? I think it was going back to your earlier part of the talk.
Amazing. Oh my gosh. That would take years. It's just like when someone gets sober off alcohol. It takes years to build trust. You have to do things like making amends. You have to go back and, yeah, you have to make amends for what's happened. You could use the transits to build trust. So let's say the aspect comes up again and you don't get in a violent altercation, you do the right thing. That can build some trust. Like you separate from them, you go into your own room, there's no fight, and you're like, okay, do you trust me a little bit more? Let's see. So it's like however long it took to deteriorate that trust, we probably want to give that much time or something to rebuild the trust. But yeah, making amends. I would like programs of recovery are really good for hard charts. Because they teach you a 12-step process of actually dealing with human emotion and problems that have come up. And A lot of times people think their problem was drinking or drugs, but their problem was actually their chart. So it's almost like making amends for your own chart.
Wonderful. Thank you. This is more of a difficult question without context, but do you have general advice for malefic transits, say the Saturn or Mars? I think we could probably include the outer planets, Pluto, your Neptune, Uranus, all those general advice probably on just the transits.
Sure. Of course, so in the book there is actually a section for every planet. So like I would study that, let's say it was a Saturn transit, I would study the Saturn section and be like, because it'll be like problematic aspects or presentations of Saturn, and then it will be like remedies for Saturn. So you can actually study it, like what might be like. So you have to look at the duration is one thing. So we don't want to provide a remedy that should be an acute duration remedy for a long-term transit. So let's say you take Tylenol for pain, that's fine, but you can't do that for 1 year in a row. So we have to kind of look at the duration of the transit, what things can be done for a long duration. And then you want to go with the highest aspect of what that planet, like for example, Saturn, one of the things it can bring is depression. Well, you can actually replace that with hard work. You're like, well, I'm not even going to let myself be depressed because I'm going to manifest hard work on this. So I think manifesting is really good. It's like not what is going to happen to me on this transit, but what am I going to manifest with this transit? Like, what do I want? If I'm afraid of Saturn, I'm like, oh no, what if I get depressed? Okay, now we got to manifest. I am happy and healthy. I work hard on my transit. I am happy and healthy. I work hard on my transit. Like, so you want to kind of find the best use of that and make a plan for yourself for the transit instead of letting the transit have its way with you.
Wonderful. Thank you. We have a very sophisticated audience today. Fantastic questions. Talking about essential dignities, any difference between difficult aspects, possibly if we're talking about natally, between dignified planets, say we have planets at domicile or exalted versus the ones that are in fall anyway or in detriment? Of course, you bring in the accidental dignities in there, but just as general thoughts on the dignities of the planets involved in possibly difficult aspects, T-squares, etc. I know that's very long-winded, but
Oh no, I'm ready for that question. Okay, so what we learn in ancient texts is that a strong planet is actually there to produce what it promises. So planetary strength is not good or bad, it is a production of manifestation. For instance, Mars in Scorpio can produce a fierce temperament, whereas a Mars in Taurus cannot. Theoretically, right? Like a Mars and Taurus person might be like, I don't like to get in fights and I don't like conflict and I just like I'm mad, but I'm not going to say anything. And the Mars and Scorpio person is like, I'm mad at you, right? Like that would be a strong Mars. Okay. Now a strong Venus can cause other things. Like Venus strong can cause a love of sweets. I remember a chart I had, I'm not breaking confidentiality because I won't tell you who, but it's like a Moon Jupiter Venus conjunction in Taurus. That was a bulimia chart. There would be transits to it, and it's like eating and eating and eating and eating, and then it's like so that's a Venus strong. It creates a love of sweets or food. So is Venus strong good? It depends on what you like. I mean, that could be problematic. So, a planet in fall might be very good from a remedy perspective because it's not causing a problem. But if we have a planet, you want to train yourself to look at dignity to see what's growing here. Like if we see a Mars in Aries conjunct the moon, conjunct the sun in the first house, conjunct Jupiter, we're like, oh my God, this baby is going to be an army general. I can tell. Like I'm going to grow that army general, the best army general I ever saw. Like we want to not deny the strong planets because that's actually a clue into what's manifesting.
wonderful. Thank you. A good question here about aspects. So, how do you generally work with, say, quincunxes or inconjuncts in terms of, I mean, it could be natally or transiting. Again, that's a very general question, but what are your thoughts on the aspects that we can't see?
Absolutely. A quincunx, of course, when you say you can't see them, that would be Hellenistic theory saying that it's inversion. And that's an optical thing. Because the chart was compared to an eyeball, and a quincunx is like the light comes in and it doesn't ever refract into a 150. So that's where you can't see it. Or even a 30 degree, it's like it doesn't go in and refract in a 30 degree. But I, as a modern astrologer who's watched charts, absolutely believe in inconjuncts as expressing, and this is how they express 4 times in a planetary cycle, and it's this weird rhythm. It goes like this. It's if let's say we did the moon. Okay, here it's trine one of them. It doesn't see the other one, so it's not getting the inconjunct. But then we get two triggers where it goes bam, bam, and it squares one and sextiles the other, and then it trines one and squares the other. And it does that 4 times in a cycle. It goes bam, bam, and then it goes all the way around and it goes bam, bam. So we actually do get 4 problematic moments in a planetary cycle on and in conjunct. And what the problem is that we get a square and a trine, or a square and a sextile. So it's like one thing's going really well and one thing's kind of a rub. So that's why it's like the rubbing aspect of like, like, so it's not as mania as a square is, which is like, but that's once a week. It's more of like this like awkward, like I can't quite figure this thing out. And so I would remedy it in the same way as any aspect we didn't like. I would watch its expression, try to figure out what I liked to do with it, and then get it on those 4 pinch points.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I'm not being rude by looking down. I've got the questions on my phone. So I think this goes back to your earlier point in the presentation. Are the Saturn degrees in the Astro Schematica book? Somebody asked.
Are the Saturn degrees?
That's what was written. Was that, I think, earlier in your presentation?
Oh, yes, yes. Astral Somatica, we actually talk about the vertebrae of every sign. So, in the back, there's like all the signs, and it will say all the things about the sign, including the vertebrae. And then you would just place the Saturn in that sign, and in assuming that it would constrict those vertebrae. And I believe there's a chapter in that book where it talks about Saturn and how to do that. So yes, actually, yeah.
Wonderful. Actually, tying into that question, do you have any massage therapist lists in Canada that give the Saturn massages? I think you were talking about that before when a time comes around.
Good question. I don't. I only know one person named Casey Cardoso who does this. And what I would say is I will absolutely, or anyone that you know, will get on the phone with a massage therapist. And I've done this thousands of times. Well, that's an exaggeration. But like I've done this a lot where I get on the phone with a massage therapist and I explain to them what we would prescribe and then they act out that prescription. So you want to work with a massage therapist who believes not believes in astrology, but is willing to listen to the consultant that you've hired to explain to them. And I'll just say something like, our prescription would be for you to get the fascia of C1 through C3 loosened up for 12 weeks in a row for this duration of time. Then on this date, we would go in and cup this area, blah, blah, blah. I will actually give prescriptions that are that detailed. I didn't get into cupping, but we release a lot of iron with cupping, which
You
is
taught me something today. I'm going to do all my massage therapies and schedule it along the way. Fantastic. Do you use the nodes at all?
I do. Yeah, if the node especially was an issue, like if you have Pluto conjunct the North Node and you have hyper obsession moments, because the North Node can expand whatever it touches, then we would work with those hyper obsessions. If the node was causing a problem, yeah, it's kind of a wild card. Things on the North Node are expanded. Let's say we had Mars on the North Node and it was just a really this is where we get athletes that are super strong and things like that. We would just have to work with that situation.
Wonderful. And part one, the presentation you were talking about clusters, do you factor in planetary hours in your work?
I do not. Because I'm so adherent to the natal chart. This is part of being a teleological astrologer. Is like we're trying to produce this thing growing over and over and over so that we're growing a coherent life. That I don't go into planetary hours because that's like a weird, vague calculation that applies to everyone. Like I'm very much into like growing a specific life, one transit at a time. So yeah, planetary hours are kind of too vague for me.
Are you a fan of perfections as well? I know that was a common question coming through. Maybe working with Lord of the Years.
This is so fun. I I've read all the Greek, and it's not that I don't use perfections. Like I know how to look up what perfection year we're in, and I know what that means. It means that that planet is under like scrutiny or like focus of that year. I get that. Um, I just don't ever get to it. I think I'm so busy with the transits that I don't. You see how I micro transit things, so I'm always like looking in this micro layer, and so the perfection is just like, okay, it's a Mars year. Okay, well, I'm dealing with passionate Mars syndrome right now. I don't have time for the perfection.
Fantastic. Well, that's the list I had rephrasing on my phone. Laurie, did you pick out any? I know we nearly 1,000 questions. I'm being hyperbolic, but Laurie, did you pick out any other questions that I might have missed in there for the last minute or two?
Would you repeat? Somebody asked about the repetitive. So you know how like the moon would have a square to everything in your chart every month. Just trying to repeat this correctly. But then you went through some of the different cycles. Like if it was Mars, it would be a square every 6 months, and I think Jupiter every 3 months. I'm not sure what I'm missing, but somebody wanted you to repeat that.
Okay. So let's take a natal square, which is a scary aspect for a lot of people. The moon hits it once a week. So every 7 days we get a square. The sun will hit it every 3 months. Okay. Mars will hit it every 6 months. And Jupiter hits it every 3 years, which means every 3 years we get a year of like a burst of our aspect. So yeah. Saturn hits it every 7 years.
Thank you. That's great.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And again, we'll apologize when we get to everybody's questions today. Thoroughly entertaining. And again, I was just laughing out loud the whole time. Absolutely brilliant.
I was too. I have to say, I didn't get the poll. I was going to do a poll and then I didn't set it up. So maybe just really quick in the chat box, I'm really curious, a few of you already asked, are you going to have a class on remediation? And so I like to ask the question back to the audience and say, do you want a course or a workshop on this topic? Because that lets me take this information back to the education department to decide what courses we'll bring. So thank you. Thank you for all those responses. And that's always helpful when we have feedback from you, our followers and our audience. So we like to listen. Thank you for doing that. Really appreciate that.
I think I know where that poll is going to go.
Yeah, I have that's how we got to this webinar is I submitted a whole class there. I have 10 weeks that we could really, and that might be too long. Maybe we could do 5 weeks, but yeah, we can definitely work on symbolic substitution. We can hone in on all these different ways and things.
I definitely want a
Work at the
class.
Moira Press School. Come find me if you want to work with me one-on-one, or we read Astrological Remediation in a reading group every Tuesday from 5:30 to 6:30. So come find me if you want to learn more one-on-one. I'm not too busy. I mean, I know it looks like I'm busy, but my mom would always say, if you want something done right, ask the busiest person you know.
And I will say, to reiterate, this replay will be on our YouTube channel. So Andrea, if any more links that you want to send me, I'm going to include them in the description boxes and comment boxes underneath the video. So everybody watching today, if you've missed any of the links that we've been sending or talked about, check out the replay on our YouTube channel and you'll see all those links down there as well.
I'm located in Portland, Oregon, but I only work online. So you can find me at themoirapress.com or andreagarretts.com.
Yeah, and those links are in the chat box. Hopefully you have already seen them and grabbed them. And I wanted to say thank you to Misty for being here today. You're probably going to see more of her in the future. She's going to help support the chat box. So just a hello to Misty.
Hi.
And thanks for Callum hosting so well as always. And yeah, and thank you, Andrea, for being here.
Thank you so much. We love our worldwide audience. Thank you so much for taking your time out on a Saturday, on a weekend as well. We very much appreciate it. And again, you can watch the replay on our YouTube channel. So we hope to see a lot of you next week for, what have we got? Tertiary progressions? Is that what we're doing? There we go.
Yeah, with the Jen Zart and Cameron Cassidy, who are teaching a brand new class at Kepler. So if you think you might be interested, come to the webinar because it will give you information about what the course will be about.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. And thank you again so much, Andrea.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea.
See you all next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.